Thank you. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to play in such a beautiful space. One of the perks of my job playing in the LA Philharmonic is that I make a living out of playing some of the most beautiful music ever written in some of the most beautiful spaces for some of the most beautiful audiences out there. So it's a great pleasure to be here. And I chose to play acoustically because I wanted to show you what this room is designed to do. A lot of the music we play was designed for rooms like this. Rather, the other way around, rooms like this were designed around the music that we play. But what I want to talk about today is actually the more humble beginnings of classical music that we have lost touch with. What we don't realize is that this music of Bach and Vivaldi actually grew out of some of the most unlikely places, out of orphanages and hospitals and asylums. And it's actually has been for me in taking the music that I play out of the concert hall actually for a group of veterans that sparked, it was an epiphany for me, and it sparked this change in who I am as a musician, as an artist, and as a human being, and I'm so thrilled to be able to share that with you today. I have always been very passionate about playing the violin. I started when I was 4 years old, and I can't remember a time when I wasn't playing. And for me, it's not just passion, it wasn't just obsession. For me, music is like oxygen. I need to be playing, and I'm not sane, or maybe I am sane when I'm not playing, but that's for another discussion. But I always remember wanting to play the pieces that my teachers said I wasn't yet ready for. So being 5 or 6, wanting to play the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, or play the Wagner Ring Cycle, or to one day play in an orchestra. And all of these dreams did come true, and it was a mixture of a combination of my wild dreams and my parents' dogged determination and devotion that I found myself studying at the Juilliard School when I was 7 and playing my debut with Zubin Mehta and the Israel Philharmonic Orchestra, playing the Mendelssohn Concerto when I was 11. And it was a wild, wild dream. I was in the middle of a solo career playing all over the US and in Europe and in Asia, and it was a dream. It was an absolute dream. But it wasn't a dream for my school district in upstate New York. I remember actually playing my debut here in Santa Barbara at the Old Granada Theater 12 years ago with Giselle Bendor conducting, and I also played Mendelssohn here. But when I went back to New York, my school district didn't let me take final exams and failed me in 6th grade. Now, mind you, I was growing up in an Indian household, so there was no way in hell that I was allowed to slack off on my studies. But at the same time, these battles with the school district kept escalating and got worse and worse, and the only way to continue playing the violin and trying to get some semblance of an education was to get out of the school district. And so I started going to college when I was 14. And I started an undergraduate in biology, and I remember reading one of my very first classes in biology, reading The Emperor of Maladies, this book on the history of cancer by Siddhartha Mukherjee. And I fell in love with medicine. I fell in love with the stories of doctors like Paul Farmer, who works with AIDS patients who have TB in Haiti, or Dr. Rick Hodes, who works with patients with disfiguring cancers in Ethiopia. These men became my new heroes, like Yo-Yo Ma and Itzhak Perlman and Yehudi Menuhin. I wanted to become a kind of doctor that healed with his hands, the doctor without borders, the Red Cross doctor. And I kept finding that my passion was in medicine and in neuroscience, and I landed an internship working in Boston in an amazing neuroscience lab. But all throughout this time, throughout my undergraduate, throughout all this research, it was the music that I craved. It was the music that my fingers were itching for. And if science, in a way, was the language of my mind, then music was the language of my heart and my soul, and I had to be playing. So I took 2 more years and I studied music in New Haven, and after that I thought, okay, what the hell do I do now? I have no idea. And of course my parents wanted me to become a doctor, like the other Dr. Gupta, and then I of course wanted to play music, and so I thought I would take my last shot with music. I would fail miserably, and it would be the end of it, and I would go off and be a good Indian boy. But I took an audition for the LA Philharmonic when I was 19, and there was 300 people auditioning for 2 spots, and I won. And I was in shock. I was in shock for 2 years. My dad moved with me from New York because I was 19, I didn't have any credit, and I couldn't drive a car, and so, your dad has to move with you. Of course, Indian dad has to move with his son. But Yeah, that was fun, coming back home after my 21st birthday party and having my dad waiting there. That wasn't, yeah. So I remember us, that this was another dream, another immense dream come true. This was a new life, a new beginning for me. This was my career, and I was making a life out of doing what I loved. Who could be luckier? And so I remember driving the new car through downtown LA one day, and I made a wrong turn. And I went a little bit further east, a little bit further south than I should have. Went down the hill. And when my dad stopped yelling at me, I realized that we were in the middle of Skid Row. And we were surrounded by tents and shopping carts and cardboard boxes and hundreds of homeless, open drug trade, open prostitution out of porta potties. My entire world turned upside down. At that moment, I felt like a hypocrite. Because here, in the middle of this new city of mine, in the middle of this new job of mine, here was this gaping hole. I didn't have to go to Haiti or India or Africa to be that Red Cross doctor. I was needed here. What good was I to the rest of the world as just one more violinist in the adored, renowned LA Philharmonic when this was in the middle of Los Angeles? With this hole in the middle of the city, I felt that there was a hole in the middle of my life. I didn't know what the point was of having all of this passion for music. What was the purpose? And later on that year, 2008, I met one of the most famous residents of Skid Row. Many of you will know who he is, Nathaniel Ayers, the subject of Steve Lopez's book, The Soloist, and the subsequent movie starring Jamie Foxx and Robert Downey Jr. Nathaniel was a double bassist studying at Juilliard, and he lived homeless in LA for nearly 30 years because he suffers from paranoid schizophrenia. And in this man who had nothing but an instrument on his back and the voices in his head, I found he understood why he played music, why music was important to him. Because for Nathaniel, music was medicine. It was his therapy. It was something that went beyond just the beautiful notes on the page. And so I started a series of escalating dares with myself and with Nathaniel. I told him that wherever he had his violin, wherever I had mine, I would play a lesson with him. And so we started in Walt Disney Concert Hall, and then worked our way out across the street to the sidewalk in front of the Colburn School, and then further down the hill to the basement of the LA Times building. And then one day on my 22nd birthday, I found myself playing a lesson with Nathaniel in the very heart of Skid Row on 7th and San Julian at the LA Men's Project in the trash-littered courtyard. And here, with the junkies falling out on the street, surrounded by rusting metal bars and barbed wire, I found that the music of Ravel and Bach and Brahms and Beethoven had as much meaning in this setting as it did in Walt Disney Concert Hall, perhaps even more. Because now this music was about communication. It came from my heart, and it registered in Nathaniel's heart. And it spoke where words and therapy and medicine had possibly failed. And so I wanted to test this again. And on a day off from the Philharmonic, I drove down to a veterans center in Long Beach, actually very close to where the main TED conference is held, called the Villages at Cabrillo. It's a veterans center. And I went there with one of our violists in the orchestra to play some duos. And we had nothing really set up. We had called them, and they kind of went, "Oh yeah, okay, great. LA Phil member's coming. Okay, sure. You can come." And I had no idea what to expect. And I remember it was a gorgeous, gorgeous day. Drove down to Long Beach, and we entered this kind of deserted army barracks, this compound. And immediately, I was overcome with the same feeling I had when I drove through Skid Row. This was a place where people had gone to be forgotten. And the worst part was that they believed it themselves. I was overcome by this sort of cold ambivalence towards us. We obviously were not welcome here as visitors. And we entered this kind of dirty, tile-floored recreation room and took out our instruments and kind of looked at each other and didn't quite know where to begin. And I thought I'd say a few words. And 10 minutes into a TED Talk, you can tell I have no problem speaking. But in front of this audience, I completely choked. Totally totally choked. And I started feeling very nervous. I felt for the first time in my life that this was a bad idea. And I have no explanation as to why I felt that way. It was just the energy of the room. And so I looked at Carrie and we shrugged and we just started playing. We played Mozart and Bach and Reger. And I started to enjoy myself because this room, I discovered, had amazing acoustics. It was like playing in a Gothic cathedral. It was perfect for the kind of music we were playing. And as we opened up, as I started to look back into the room, this room was changing. It was no longer like talking into a brick wall. Suddenly, this energy was transforming in this room, and I saw people start to gather at the windows and at the doors, and I kind of felt like a Pied Piper, like I was bringing people into this place, maybe this space of healing, this safe place that might lead to redemption and grace, and was full of beauty. And what did it for me, what the spark was for me when I committed to making this change in my life as a musician, was when this woman walked up to me after the concert. And she was shaking, she had a palsy, and she had tears streaming down her face, but she had a big, bright, beautiful smile on her face. And she says to me, "We love classical music. My dad used to play the records of those two Mozart duos you just played for us. And I grew up listening to this music, but no one ever comes to play for us. No one ever comes to see us. But for me, hearing the music is like hearing the sunshine," and I started to choke up. And then she says to me, "You know, for the first time in 20 years when you guys played, I stopped shaking without medication." The light bulb went off, you know. And since then, since that episode, I have gone into departments of mental health. I've gone into homeless shelters. I've gone into the Patton State Mental Hospital in San Bernardino. I recently played for 180 men in blue jumpsuits at the Pitches County Detention Center. And over and over and over, I find that my organization, the Street Symphony, is one of the most meaningful things I can do as a musician. Because I'm able to show these audiences that they still have the capacity to experience something beautiful. And that beauty might exist within them, that spark might exist within them. That this music is about a communication that goes from one soul to another. And when we unify each other in that space, in that sense, we're all human. When you take away the footlights, when you take away the stage, and you take away the tuxedo tails, we're just two people in a room. And I'm playing for you, and we're sharing that. And at that point in time, we're completely equal. I want to close with a quote by the famous German composer Robert Schumann, who himself suffered from schizophrenia and died in a mental asylum, his entire career shattered. And Schumann says, "To send light into the darkness of men's hearts, such is the duty of the artist." And I feel that the Street Symphony is not just my duty as a professional musician. I wouldn't dare call myself an artist. I wouldn't dare call myself an artist. But I feel that this transcends a responsibility into that it's my human responsibility, even beyond a civic responsibility, that this music is something that speaks where words fail. Thank you.